Hi friends, in this session we are going to cover optionals. Options are very important. You will definitely find at least 3 questions in interviews regarding optionals. What is optional? Optional is which is not mandatory, right? Optional variable basically, optional variable means which is not mandatory to have a value. Okay, a variable which is capable of holding a value or nothing. It may or may not contain a value. Simple thing is may or may not contain a value. It may or may not contain a value. May not means nothing means nil, NIL. If you want to put nothing into the variable, you can use nil. An optional variable may or may not contain a value. When to use? When to use optional? When you are not sure that variable definitely contains a value. Okay, so far we have declared hundreds of variables. So out of hundreds of variables, there is nothing optional. Every variable was containing a value. Now, if you want to declare anything which may or may not contain a value, in that case, you can use optional variable. Optional variable. Okay. By default, all the variables, whatever we have declared so far, cannot hold NIL, cannot hold nothing. It definitely contains a value. It definitely holds a value. But it cannot hold nil. Let's say, let me take a playground. Optionals. Let me put student information. It's a name, which is string. This is how we declare the data. Okay. I have the name here, DNREDDi. I want to put name equal to nothing. I want to put name equal to nothing and make this as var. I'm changing the value here. I'm putting DNREDDi. I'm putting nil here. See what is the error? No error. Run. What is the error? Nil cannot be assigned to type string. This is string. The name is of type string. You are trying to put nil. I cannot hold that. I can only hold the strings. I can only hold the strings. Okay. See here. Once a variable is declared with so and so type, it only holds that type of value. Even if you want to put nothing, if you want to empty it, it is not possible. If you want to put nil and make it empty, which is not possible. Okay. When to use optionals? When there is a chance the variable might contain nothing. Let's say let student name, which is string. I'm just giving Madhu. Let me put one more thing where student nickname. Nickname, everybody should not contain nickname, right? It is not to guarantee that everybody contains nickname. Okay. This is how we declare optional. When you put question mark, there is doubt. It may or may not contain a value. Here, student name is the one. He may or may not contain a nickname. So we have declared it as a string question mark. Assume that he has some nickname. If he has some nickname, just put that. If you want to remove the nickname also, you can do that by putting nil. If you want to remove the name, which is not possible, because we are clearly telling here student contains a name. Even if it is variable also, it is not possible. I'm just repeating it. There is a student contains a name. So we have declared it as variable name, student name. After string, we have put some name here, Madhu. Same student may or may not contain nickname. So I have declared a variable name is student nickname. Since it is since he may or may not contain a value, we have declared it as a question mark. When you put question mark, that is doubt, that is optional. This variable may or may not contain a value. This variable may or may not contain a value. If it contains the value, this is the value it contains. If it is not containing a value, it contains nil. Only optionals can hold either value or nil. This is optional variable, right? Since we have kept as question mark, string question mark, this is a optional string, a string optional. It contains either a string or nothing. Here we are clearly telling that it is string only. It cannot hold nil, it cannot hold integer, anything. See here, nil cannot be assigned to type string. This is string type. You're trying to put nil here. I cannot hold. This is what you need to remember. This is optional. How to declare optional? Same thing, whatever we have declared so far, but only you need to put question mark. Since you have kept the question mark, you can also hold nil here. Here, see, student nickname equal to nil. There is no complaint here. There is no issue here. When you put to student name equal to nil, there is issue. This is only declared for strings, not for nils. If you want to declare nil, use the question mark. If you use question mark here, it allows student may or may not contain a value. Student at this line of line number 3, he contains a value. At line number 7, he does not contain a value. Since it is optional, you can also put nothing. Nothing means nil here. Hope the difference between general variable, regular variable, and optional variable is clear. Only advantage what we get with the optional is it may or may not contain a value. If it contains the value, it contains the value which is of given type. Otherwise, it contains nil. One more example. Only holds strings. Let me put one more example. First name and last name. First name and last name. In South India, everybody contains first name and last name. In North India, some people only contains name. Okay. Let's put first name. First name is initial. Some people may contain initial, some people may not contain initial. So I am putting nothing. Okay. Where let last name. Last name, everybody contains a name, so I'm declaring name is as string. Here, since it is optional may or may not contain a value. Here it has nothing. In future, it may have value. So whenever you are declaring optional, make sure it is variable only. Even if you declare let also, there is no issue. Whenever you are trying to change the value, then it gives the error. If you want to put if you want to put some value here, then it complains. First name is let constant. Try to convert that into a variable. Now at line number 9, the variable first name contains nothing. At line number 14, it contains a string value. Here, it not only be the strings, it can also be the integers, floats, whatever type you want, you can use here, not only be the strings. Here we have two things here. Now I want to get full name. I have first name here. Let me put last name also. Last name. Changing the value. Here I'm putting nothing here, or else you can directly give the value here. DNREDDi. Okay. I want to get full name. To get the full name, what we need to do? We need to club together, right? Club first name and last name together. Let full name equal to first name plus last name. Run and also print full name. Here, see the error. Value of type string question mark must be unwrapped to a value of type string. You are trying to perform operation addition between optional plus string, which I will not allow. Optional means may or may not contain a value. It may or may not contain a value means it is magical box, right? Magical, we don't know whether it contains a value or not. In real time, there are 100 lines of code. You cannot know whether it definitely contains a value or not. Here we know, we are seeing it. whether the first name is containing a value or not. So we know in real time we do not know whether exactly the optional contains a value or not. Whenever you are trying to perform operation between any optionals, any optional or optional plus normal variable, it won't allow. We need to open the magical box and give the value. We need to unwrap the magical box and unwrap the magical box and give the value. Then only it performs. There are multiple ways to unwrap it. There are multiple ways to unwrap it. Optional unwrapping. What is optional unwrapping? Optional unwrapping is a process of what we can say, process of underlying value, process of taking underlying value of an optional. Underlying value of optional, what it contains actually, taking that is optional unwrapping. There are multiple optional unwrapping techniques. One is this force unwrapping. First thing is force unwrapping. Force unwrapping is process of forcefully telling. Forcefully telling to the compiler that it definitely contains a value. Okay. Here I have put, let me command B for building. Here compiled, there are no issue after putting this exclamation. Exclamation putting here means this is force unwrapping. Force unwrapping means we are telling to the compiler, first name is an optional, but it definitely contains a value. You go ahead and perform the operation. Okay. Let me print this. It is perfect. Incredibly DNREDdi. Let me put some space here. Concatenate, adding two strings here by using plus operator. Okay. Force unwrapping works here. Incredibly space DNREDdi. Okay. Assume that the first name is not available. See what happens. It is crashed. It is crashed. While running the application, it is crashed because we are forcefully telling to the compiler, you don't worry, first name is an optional variable, it definitely contains a value, but actually it has no value. So whenever you perform force unwrapping on an optional which has no value, there is chances of crashing. So this is not recommended to use, but you should, this is mandatory to understand. Force unwrapping. This is one thing. Let's say I just want to remove this. I want to put it here itself. This is called implicitly unwrapped optional. What it says, it definitely contains a value in future. Before performing the operation, it definitely contains a value. You don't worry now. This is the meaning. Now also the error is gone. Okay. One way of run it. Let me remove the error first. Okay. First name has no value, but the error is gone. Though we have not put the exclamation, we have kept the exclamation here while declaring itself. We are telling to the compiler, this is implicitly unwrapped optional. Before performing the operation, it definitely contains a value. You don't worry now. This is implicitly unwrapped optional. This is regular optional variable. This is implicitly unwrapped optional. Okay, we are simply telling to the compiler, you don't worry and do perform operation. Now see what happens. Again crashed. If there is no value, we are telling to the compiler, you don't worry, but it has no value. When there is no value and it is trying to perform the operation, again there is a crash. Again, this is also not recommended. This is also not recommended. Declaring implicitly unwrapped optional is not recommended. This is whenever you are 100% sure that the optional variable, the first name contains a value before performing the operation, then only you go for exclamation. Otherwise, put question mark only here itself. Here also. Okay, options can be declared in two different ways. One is question mark, another one is exclamation. When you use question mark, this is simply optional. When you use exclamation, this is implicitly unwrapped optional. You don't need to unwrap it again. Already implicitly unwrapped. You don't need to unwrap it here. When you use question mark, you need to unwrap it by using either force unwrapping, or there are other techniques as well. There are other techniques as well. Okay, let me run it here. I'll repeat them again. Okay, very, very important. Okay, here, since this is optional, we need to either force unwrap or declare the variable itself as a implicitly unwrapped optional. Clear? Two things we have seen. One is implicitly unwrapped optional to unwrap the optional. One is force unwrapping to unwrap the optional. Okay, let me make this as optional. Here, we need to use either exclamation, we need to, otherwise you need to follow some other ways to unwrap it up. Okay, I am using this operator. Double question mark, we haven't seen so far. Double question mark, this is called a nil coalescing operator. Let's see what happens. DNREDdi, DNREDdi. If first time contains no value, see what happens. Only DNREDdi is printed. Here, what it says, if optional contains a value, it considers the same value. If optional does not contain a value, considers this the default value, whatever we have put here. Supplementary, if it contains a value, use that, otherwise use this value. We're supplying something if optional contains no value. This is called a nil coalescing operator. Okay, this is another way of optional unwrapping. We are checking if contains a value, use that, otherwise use this value, providing some default value as well. Okay, actual unwrapping techniques are coming now. Double question mark, nil coalescing operator. Okay, optional unwrapping is optional binding. Optional binding is the one of the unwrapping techniques. Very, very important. This is what you need to use most of the time. Okay, let me comment all this stuff. Let me redeclare everything. Then optional is after string. This is optional. Let implicit optional. How to declare implicit optional? This is how we declare implicit optional. Okay, these are the two ways of declaring optionals. How to unwrap optionals? One way is force unwrapping, another one is nil coalescing operator. Third way is by default already implicit unwrapped optional, comma implicit. Okay, the fourth way is optional binding. Optional binding is the one thing which you need to use, which is recommended way. Okay, what is optional binding here? Binding means linking together, right? Linking two things, binding. Okay, here let me take where first name, where first name is after string, where last name is after string. Here string optional, here is string. Let me put first name equal to let me put last name equal to. Okay, I want to perform operation. I want to perform operation full name. How we do generally, first name plus last name, but it will not allow because this is optional. It may or may not contain a value. Forcefully tell or give me the proper value which is inside the optional. Okay, one way is force unwrapping, which is not recommended. So how to use this now? How to make this in a recommended way? Here, let I can use temporary first name equal to first name. What we are doing, we are binding. This is one value, this is another value. We are binding. We are putting the value which is there in the temporary variable, which is there in the optional variable into a temporary variable. You are simply assigning here. If it contains the value print, I'm taking a variable. Full name is type string. Full name equal to. Now we can use the first name plus last name. Last name is anyways regular value, regular variable. If it has no value, what we can do? First name is empty. First name is empty, or what we can do is full name equal to last name is the full name now. Now full name okay, what we are doing, we are checking here if optional contains the value, take that value and keep it in the temporary variable. Use the temporary variable in the block. Okay, again, if you use first name here, again, same concept, you need to put exclamation something. But we are taking the value from the optional variable. If it contains the value, then only use that. Otherwise, ignore. Otherwise, do the else statement. Otherwise, simply ignore. I'm putting else statement for now. Okay, you can also put else, or you can also ignore it. Underscore first name plus last name. DNREDDi. Let me put some spaces as well. DNREDDi space DNREDDi. Okay, if it has no value, here first name I have read, I'm just removing that. If it has no value, the last name is the full name, right? The last name is full name equal to DNREDDi only. This is the recommended way of optional unwrapping. This is called optional binding. We are binding values. We are taking this value and putting it into the another temporary variable. This is called binding, optional binding. Okay, people call it as iflet. People call it as iflet because most of them don't know what is optional binding. The terminology most of the people does not know. So they call it as iflet. Even in interviews, if they ask you iflet, you need to tell this. Iflet is one of the optional unwrapping techniques where we take the optional variable into a temporary variable. Optional iflet is an optional unwrapping techniques. One of the optional unwrapping techniques where we take the optional variable value into a temporary variable. And there is something called guardlet. Underscore first name equal to first name. If it has no value, just return. Return is not allowed here. Anyways, exit. I'm putting exit here. Put in a proper way. Here, what I can do is full name. How to get the full name? Full name we have already declared the variable. Full name equal to first name underscore first name plus last name. Here, what I'm trying to do is I'm putting there is no first name. There is no first name. What we are doing here? Same thing. We are taking a value from an optional to a temporary variable and using that out of the block. Here within the block we are using. Here out of the block we are using. What is this block? Else block. Else block means if it has no value, then go on and do something here. If it has a value, do the stuff next line. This temporary variable is now accessible in the rest of the program, rest of the file, or rest of the function, rest of the file actually here. You can use this underscore first name anywhere from the else block. From here, only in else block you cannot access it, but next to the else block you can access that. Here, underscore first name is the temporary variable. Here, if you see underscore first name, right? Underscore first name is only accessible here. If you want to put underscore first name, it is not auto-populating. It is not coming here because this is not accessible. Only the temporary variable in case of if let. In interviews, there is a chance of there are chances of asking you what is the difference between let and guard. Not there are chances. 1000% they will ask you this question. What is the difference between if let and guard let? In case of if let, if optional contains a value, the temporary variable is accessible within the block. In case of guard statement, the temporary variable is accessible rest of the program, rest of the function. If it is in the function, rest of the function. If it is simply a file, right, you can access the underscore first name anywhere next to the guard statement. Okay, we encounter these cases. This is all about optionals. There is something called optional training. Optional training we deal it with when we deal with classes. I'm just repeating. Optional is a variable which may or may not contain a value. If it is not containing a value, means it contains nil. If it is containing a value, it contains the declared type. Okay, even if you put nil here, it will not allow. Only that is given for string. Last name only holds the strings, not nils. Okay, specify type string. Okay, options can be declared in two different ways. One is by using question mark, another one is by using exclamation. When you declare it with exclamation, this is called what is that? Implicit unwrapped optional. This is optional. When do we use implicitly unwrapped optional? Whenever you're 100% sure that it definitely contains a value, it will contain a value. It will contain, will means future. It will definitely contain a value. Then go for force unwrapping. Sorry, implicitly unwrapped optional. Then optional unwrapping techniques. What are the optional unwrapping techniques? One is force unwrapping. Another one is nil coalescing operator. Another one is if let optional binding. In optional binding, there is another concept called guard let. Okay. In case of force unwrapping, what you are telling to the compiler? Whenever you use force unwrapping, you are telling to the compiler, don't worry, it definitely contain a value. It has a value. Don't worry, it has a value. You go ahead and perform. When you do that, what happens? When you do that, what happens? If it has a value, there is no issue. If it has no value, then there is an issue. If it has no values, it gives you error. The application crashes. So that is not recommended. Force unwrapping is not recommended. Okay. The other way is nil coalescing operator. Nil coalescing operator simply provides you some default value, safe value. Default value it provides. If optional has no value, then the default value is considered. Okay. Then what we have? Optional binding. Optional binding by using if let. What happens in case of if let? The value which is there in the optional is taken by is assigned to the temporary variable, and that is used within the block. In case of guard let, the first name, right, which is not accessible within the else block. If you try to use first, which is not accessible, the first underscore first name is not accessible in the else block. The underscore first name is accessible in the rest of the program, rest of the file in case of file, rest of the function or rest of the method in case of methods. Okay, here we need to use in the else block, we need to stop it. If there is no value, you cannot go ahead. You cannot go ahead. Either you can use return, or this in this file you can use exit, but actually we use return only. Stop it. If it has no value, stop it. Don't go further. In case of if let what happens if it has a value, it performs this, otherwise it checks next. If you put the same statement here, let me put the same statement here, we get some errors actually, because underscore first name is accessible. Here we are again declaring underscore first name, maybe we get this kind of error. If not, actually it does not come here actually, because if it has no value, here itself we are stopping the program. Here itself we are stopping the program, exiting. In case of God statement should be the last statement actually. If it has a value, perform otherwise simply you're writing from here. Any statement which you want to execute next here, if the statement is false, if the God statement is false, which is not possible. Once it is false, here itself we are exiting. Okay, anyways, this is much confusing. Okay, if let and God let, differences are clear, right? Now go through the documentation and see. Options, optional is optional variable, a variable which is capable of holding a value or nil. An optional variable may or may not contain a value. When to use? When you are not sure that variable definitely contains a value or not. This is let constant. Let's say I'm having a constant here 10. I'm trying to put value nil here, which is not allowed because a constant is for holding only integers, not for nils. How to declare optional? Options can be declared in two different ways. One is by using question mark after the data type. Another one is implicitly unwrapped optional by using exclamation. You try that as well. Variable and optional integer optional. I have a value here, so I kept it. I have no value here, just putting nil. This we see practically. Optional unwrapping. Optional unwrapping is a process of extracting here, basically extracting the underlying value of an optional. Extracting is opening and take the value from the magical box. If you directly perform the operation on magical box, if it has a value, no issue. If it has no value, there is issue. Here, first name, last name, full name. Here, error optional must be unwrapped before it is used. Before it is used. Here, force unwrapping, implicitly unwrapped optional. This is force unwrapping. While performing the operation, putting the exclamation is force unwrapping. Process of confirming that optional variable has a value by using exclamation. We are confirming to the compiler. Compiler, you go ahead and perform operation. But this is not recommended because if it has no value, there is a crash. Optional variable must contain a value before it is used. It is okay. Implicitly unwrapped optional, putting the exclamation. We know how to use that. Optional binding. Other than force unwrapping, optional binding is a simple and recommended way to unwrap optional. You use optional binding to check the optional contains the value or not. If it does contain a value, wrap it and put it into the temporary variable. That is simply taking the value from the optional variable and putting that into the temporary variable. Generally, we need to make sure the optional variable has a value other than nil before performing the operation. You can also check this way. Here we're checking first for first name, right? You can also check first name equal to nil. This is also correct. This is also not recommended, but using the optional binding, if let or God let is recommended. This is also, we can also compare that with the nil. Using optional binding, we know how to use this. Nil coalescing operator using double question mark and putting some default value if it has no value. Okay. Options, everything is important here in case of interview. What is optional? What is implicitly unwrapped optional? What are the optional unwrapping techniques? What is force unwrapping? When do you use optional unwrapping? When do you use implicitly unwrapped optional? What is nil coalescing operator? People does not know what is nil coalescing operator. They simply ask you double question mark. What is the difference between single question mark and double question mark? They will ask. Most of the people, 95% of the people, at least 90% of the people does not know what is the nil coalescing operator. They know double question mark, but they don't know what it is called. Now we have optional chaining. Optional chaining will be seen. Guard keyword. Guard condition else you need to exit from here once it is false. Either you need to use return continue, break, or exit. Remember, all four things can be used, but we 99% of the time we use written only. Okay, this is all about optionals. If you have any doubts, you can ask me.
Force unwrapping and implicitly optional both are same.
No, these two are not same.
So what is difference actually? I could not understand the difference between both the things.
Here, while declaring itself, we are confirming to the compiler. Compiler, you don't worry, it contains a value. You don't worry, it will contain a value. It will contain a value in future. You don't worry, it will contain a value. Here,
the declaration time we are using. Okay. Tell me.
Here,
sorry.
Wherever you are using, we are telling there, we are telling compiler, it has a value, go ahead. But this is not recommended. Even this is also not recommended. But sometimes we use this while declaring outlets, etc. You see them. Everything is important here. Coming to the optional, you will definitely find at least 3 questions. The interview starts with the basic questions only. So you need to be ready to almost, we have covered around 15 to 16 questions so far. Data types, way of declaring, okay, what's new in latest Swift, what's the current version of Xcode, macOS, iOS, operators, conditional operator, type annotation, type inference, string interpolation, tuples, name tuples, how to use tuples. Okay, because we don't need to cover all these things in depth. Even the tuples are not required. We don't use, but in interviews, they will find a question. That time you should be able to answer. That is the reason we are covering everything.
Okay, we will practice. Yeah, we will practice it today. If anything, not tomorrow, surely. We'll practice it today, then only we'll come to know.
Yeah. If you guys have some time, okay, we'll see some examples tomorrow, like taking the input from the user. User may or may not give the proper input, right? Performing the operations. There is some issue. Here itself, we have a read line. If user, we have used the same thing, right? See here, if let, we have used already. Here also if let, we have used. Converting that string into integer, it may or may not contain value. That is the optional. If you directly put 10 here, it will not allow. Only whenever you are using if let, here RHS should be optional. Initializer for conditional binding must be optional type, not integer type. You are putting integer. Since you are putting integer, there is no need of optional binding here. Directly use the integer. Otherwise, whenever you are not sure, here all strings may not be convertible into the integer. That is the reason we have temporary variable here, converting that input into the integer. If it is successful, take that. Otherwise, ignore that. Else block.
And sir, you are declaring variable by underscore input. This is your way of writing declaring variable, or is it a recommended way? I could not understand this underscore input. What is that actually?
You can also use input only, but there is some confusion that which input you are using, this input or this input.
Okay.
You need not to put input underscore also. You can also put a also, no issue. But this is recommended because this is input to underscore input, you will understand clearly. If you put a, you cannot understand what it is a. If you have, we're out of time. If you have any doubts, you can ping me on WhatsApp. Okay, we'll have class tomorrow as well. If there are no class, I will inform you before itself. Thank you for your time. See you tomorrow.
Yes, I have one question.
Yeah, please rejoin. Okay, we're out of time. Please rejoin. I'm joining.